I declare open this public hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Affairs inquiry into economic self-determination and opportunities for First Nations Australians. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today and the lands in which our representatives join today too. And I want to pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait peoples and their cultural and spiritual connections to Australia's lands and waters. On behalf of the committee, I welcome any traditional owners who are here today. I remind all senators and members that proceedings are to be conducted in a respectful and courteous way. I remind senators and members that this is a workplace, and this is especially true for public officials and stakeholders who are present before us. It is essential they are treated with respect, that they feel safe when they present to our hearings before us. As Chair, I'll be particularly vigilant in ensuring cultural safety for First Nations people and culturally and racially marginalised groups at these proceedings. In accordance with the Committee's resolution of the 7th of September 2022, this hearing will be broadcast on Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the inquiry website. I remind members of the media who may be present or listening in of the need to fairly and accurately report proceedings of the committee. I now welcome our first representatives to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
Kia ora koutou, nami nui kia koutou. My name is Benjamin Bateman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Te Runanga o Ngaitahu in the South Island of New Zealand.
Thank you very much. So, although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I now invite you to make a brief opening statement before we proceed to discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you for having me along today. I look forward to the conversation. So as I said, the Chief Executive of Ngaitahu, which is one of the iwi or Māori tribes in New Zealand. We have gone through a settlement reconciliation process with the Crown. They have a long history, obviously, relationships with the Crown, the Government of New Zealand, stretching back to 7 generations before we settled with the government in 1998. So I'm more than happy to talk about any aspects relating to the role of the Treaty of Waitangi in the economic reconciliation process that we went through historically, and also just generally around any of the challenges and opportunities for Ngaitahu within our own context that you were interested in exploring, including aspects around Māori land and those matters. Also, any other insights you'd like around growing and diversifying our economic base in the story that we have through our history around how we've what we have done, if that's of use, or any other elements around. I think an interesting area to explore with you will be around capability development and capability support for mobs, but also for what we've gone through here with iwi, and other lessons as you know, if you're interested in any other lessons around those elements. So I won't spend too much time on an introduction other than to say I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners over your way, and I look forward to the conversation with you this morning.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us at today's hearing. I know that you're also very busy doing the things to grow the economic strength of your mob over there. And congratulations on becoming the permanent CEO as well recently. I suppose the first question from me kind of goes to, I suppose, the broader narrative that exists about First Nations people and our contribution to the economy. And in Australia, it's a really kind of not well-known story. I think there's some really negative stereotypes that exist out there about Aboriginal people, and there is not enough about our economic strength. I'm keen to hear about, do you experience similar challenges where you are, and what are the steps that you've taken to, I suppose, kind of unpick that narrative that exists about you?
Yeah, so I think historically, absolutely, Māori as the Indigenous people of New Zealand have there have been stereotypes and all those kind of elements that's widely kind of covered, and it's been a real journey. So I think where we are is we're 25 years post our settlement with the Crown, but 7 generations before that actually were undertaking, immediately after the Crown signed the Treaty of Waitangi, where breaches were starting to occur, and we started to record our dissatisfaction with that. So there have always been these stereotypes. Where we are today as a collective of iwi or Māori in New Zealand, the Māori economy is widely kind of talked about as being worth about 70 billion to the New Zealand economy every year. Where we are economically, we manage an asset base of around 2 billion, but also have a significant diversified economic portfolio that we've built up over an extended period of time. That is, having a degree of economic independence has been very important for Ngāi Tahu, that we obviously went through a treaty settlement process. We settled with the Crown for a figure of $170 million back in 1998, and we have then just worked on developing our economic independence and in a range of different industries over the last 25 years. Some of that has gone a long way towards actually the wider population of New Zealanders understanding critically the core elements of our cultural heritage, because we're able to display that more clearly on the land when we have our own degree of economic independence. But also just understanding far more clearly about our role within the wider community of New Zealand. So for my own, I grew up on the west coast of the South Island, at school over there a long time ago now, to where we are now with our communities over there. Probably the biggest change that we've seen is just our mark on the land. We have a lot more of the parts that make us unique. And actually that's a really important part of the story of the whole community over on the West Coast, as an example. Just it's a far more normal and natural part of us as a multicultural society when you've got Indigenous groups that have a far greater degree of economic independence.
And what does that do for, I suppose, kind of your mob and your kind of relationship with government? How does that kind of set you up?
Yeah, so we've got
challenges and opportunities. Yeah,
absolutely, challenges and opportunities. So I think we have a treaty framework which has enabled us to a degree of, legal recognition from a legislative perspective, but also from as a First Nations people, the recognition that we get from the status that we have as the Indigenous people. But the challenge, the generations that fought the claim before us got us to this position that we are now. The challenge is with different shifts and different government policies, maintaining a degree of understanding that actually we're all in this together. Our interests are obviously looking after our whānau, our iwi. So we're 84,000 members in our tribe. That's our main obligation. But also we're part of that broader New Zealand community discourse, and we're actually as invested in seeing solutions and seeing good outcomes for the country as anyone else. And so it's a real opportunity. I think you see it as an opportunity rather than a challenge. When you get to the stage that we're a critical part of the future economics of the South Island. And so it's in the Crown's interest to work closely with us to achieve mutually beneficial outcomes around taking the country forward. And that's a role that we take really seriously as a treaty partner. And that's how we see ourselves, because that's the status that we have as the Indigenous people here. So it's a I'm sorry?
No, sorry. I'm interested in the kind of how has your kind of strong economic base meant that you've been able to take care of mob? I think there's some, like, I think there are some people who wouldn't necessarily see, you having a very diversified economic portfolio, then link that to kind of why is that important, being able to take care of your community?
It's a very good question. So we deliver a huge range of social programs across a range of different areas, environmental, social, in a whole bunch of spaces to ensure or to protect and enhance the well-being of our own people. So we have an annual figure which is fairly chunky that we spend entirely on those outcomes. So improving health, education, environmental, capability development outcomes for people, which has a huge benefit, like a social return on investment benefit for the broader economy. And we take that really seriously. We actively measure all our data, so we collect a lot of information about the impacts that we have, and we can demonstrate real social return on investment for each of those interventions that we make. And it's a really this is a growing area of research. We're highly sort of into that space of innovating and prototyping different solutions that we can have to take our people forward. So we've got really clear measures around how we've helped improve educational outcomes or social outcomes for our whānau. So we'll never say that we've got that as good as it could be, and we've got that right. It's a constant work on, and we're constantly refining and delivering what we do. But to give you an idea, we deliver 149 programs currently, so across a range of different social kind of focused areas, cultural development. When I say cultural, I mean developing capability, but also developing some of our more traditional cultural practices and things of that kind. And we're really proud of what we're able to achieve over the last 25 years, and it's really exciting now to move into that next phase where we can take it. And things around data and getting more clarity of impact and being able to tell that story more is a real opportunity as we go into the future with these kind of elements.
And I suppose I'm keen because you talked about kind of being around for 25 years, and now I think you're kind of by all accounts like an economic powerhouse in New Zealand. If we think back to kind of what the early days were like as you were getting started, what do you see were some of the key decisions that you made as a group that really kind of set you on a path to where you are now? And I suppose the other part of that I'm really interested in is what were the kind of skills and knowledge that you needed early on to get you to where you are today? So like the decisions that you made, but then the kind of skills and the knowledge that you needed.
Yeah, so I think Ngāi Tahu, we were always very clear on the breaches and on the things, not the grievance, but the wrongs that needed to be righted from a very early stage. So we were able to capture those and had a real clarity of what they were. And those kind of elements of our evidence was, as I said, there were 7 generations before the last 25 years that kind of built up this huge breadth of evidence around what were the wrongs that needed to be put right. We absolutely have benefited from some phenomenal leadership over time. So I genuinely feel like I stand on the shoulder of some giants that have gone before us in that space. So really strong leaders within our tribe that were able to bring our people with us, bring people with them on that settlement journey. But then also we benefited. You have to acknowledge the efforts that the Crown went to at that time to acknowledge the wrongs and make apologies for those wrongs and undertake a settlement. We took a settlement at that time that was worth approximately 1% of the value of the losses that we'd suffered. But we obviously had to get that. That was a difficult thing to get through. I remember my own grandparents at the time. It was a very challenging time to get that kind of agreement. But there was a degree of, not pragmatism, but realism about actually let's just get on and actually start setting our own economic agenda. And it's better to take this now and actually and then be able to make some decisions of your own. I think that's been the critical thing. We don't actually have we're able to act independently. We've got a degree of control over our own destiny. We still partner with the Crown when it's mutually beneficial, and there are real areas where that's a great thing to be doing, where it's of benefit to our people and to the wider community. We still do partner, but we're actually able to make decisions, and having that economic engine enables you to have some independence over your own choices. In terms of capability, we certainly are dealing with that now. We were probably very privileged to have some phenomenal legal minds and things like that in the past that have helped us get us to that point. We also benefited from an incredible amount of support from the wider, from key pockets of the wider New Zealand. So we had some fantastic supporters that helped us through those early days. The Crown also, in those early days of capability development, when we didn't have it ourselves in-house, we were supported and to develop some of that capability. And going into the future, we're actually talking about that right now. What are the areas of capability we're going to need to take us into that next 25 years? Our whakatoki, or our tribal kind of, is actually for us and our children after us. So we're always thinking about that next generation and the grandkids after that. And we know that we're actually, I was talking with someone yesterday, we probably need the data scientists and the mathematicians and more of those people coming through now. And that's where we're kind of shifting some of our thinking around the skill sets and things we're going to need going into the next 25 years.
And on the kind of the skill sets kind of theme, there's lots to learn from, I suppose other kind of First Nations people around the world who have done some of this work as well. Have you engaged with some of the First Nations communities who are doing this stuff really well? How important is it to do that work? And do you think that's something that would be worthwhile continuing to facilitate, like First Nations groups coming together to learn from one another?
Absolutely, it's a fundamental aspect. Is always learning and always being adaptive and agile, and understanding that you haven't got all the answers, and there'll be others out there that are doing really well. So we actively engage with a range of First Nations groups. We've got a historic relationship into Hawaii with the First Nations groups up in there. Recently, I've been up in Kamloops, up in British Columbia, with the Tulo Institute of Indigenous Economics. So the Canadians are doing some incredible things in those spaces around Indigenous groups. So the Thompson Rivers University up there, they host that Tulo Centre. So we have a University of Canterbury here in Christchurch. We have a Ngāi Tahu Research Centre, and we sort of engage in various kind of bilateral conversations with whoever is interested. We are hosting a hui or meeting here next week with a number of iwi hapu groups from across New Zealand, and we've got some Canadian speakers coming out to talk about some of their approaches up there. There's real commonalities. There's real clarity in different communities around the place, and I think if you can see Indigenous growth and capability as a real opportunity for strengthening your whole country, I think it's a real mindset shift that needs to be made. There's obviously significant equity gaps that you're trying to close, which is going to be good for everybody if you can close those gaps. But actually, it's a real strength. I think that we can bring opportunities that the Crown can't bring. We offer things in different spaces that are unique and of real value to the wider society, as well as obviously as to ourselves.
Thank you. And I feel like I could ask you questions for a while, but I do need to share the call. So I go to my colleague, Senator Little. Senator Little, can you hear us? You're on mute if you're trying to speak. That's all right. I might go to Ms. Cheney and then we'll go to Senator Little next.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just following on from what you were saying, then you said we can bring opportunities that the Crown can't bring. Can you talk a little bit more about the sorts of opportunities that are enabled because of that structure?
Yeah, so we for a start, thank you. We really understand our people in our community, so we have a good sense of this just through our through our connections. So the way we are structured is we have effectively an elected council of representatives from each of the communities. We've got 18 different what we call marae communities that exist within our tribal area. We also just through our information that we have, we know where the opportunities are for interventions or for having real impact in some of those really important social, health, or education, as example, spaces and environmental spaces. So that can be a real opportunity for delivery of better outcomes, either working in concert with us or us actually leading out on delivery of some of those things. And that's some of the approaches we've taken in different spaces have been there. And then from a commercial,
just to clarify, so do you mean social development opportunities or economic opportunities?
Well, it's both. So social development opportunities, certainly we understand examples of, environmental outcomes that the Ministry or the Department of Conservation might want to achieve here in New Zealand. They deliver some of those programs and things with us, either in partnership or we actually deliver them ourselves, because it's been borne out that we can actually have better outcomes when they're delivered in that way. And then on the economic side of things, there are significant examples and we can actually serve as a really useful economic partner for getting investment into the country or for working to develop serious infrastructure projects. And so we can be a really important, engine for generating economic activity that is in the Crown's interest as well as our own. So to give you an idea, we have a large property development business. We have a range of indirect investments that we hold across different portfolios. We have a large farming, forestry, tourism, and other sort of primary sector and a big fishing sort of arm as well. So we can sort of bring in different opportunities, partner on different things, all to the wider benefit of the community.
So am I right in thinking that some of those opportunities you bring by virtue of knowing the communities really well, and
Yes.
others are by virtue of you being a commercially driven entity that has, partnerships and commercial opportunities that wouldn't be available to the Crown?
That's right. Yeah, and it's a probably ability to be that sense of understanding. I'd get it down to that understanding the environment. There's a general push in New Zealand around localism, so really understanding. So centrally, the central government kind of seeing more activity and enhancement of solutions locally being delivered locally to see better outcomes both economically and socially in those communities. And so we can be, as iwi, as Māori, tribally, Ngāi Tahu can be a really useful as part of that sort of government approach around seeing some deeper activity in the regions. New Zealand, obviously, a little bit different from Australia in that we don't have a federal kind of state system. So what we do see at times is that Wellington tends to hold some things quite close, and when they want to push things out, we can be a really useful delivery mechanism to seeing those outcomes kind of succeeding. And then, economically, that's the other side of it. But the more important things for us is actually just seeing a continual lift in social outcomes and social delivery for Ngāi Tahu. So that's really what our core focus is always around. The economics kind of give you the tools to do that, to have those positive impact.
And with that, your long-term, multi-generational view on creating flourishing community, at least theoretically, should be pretty closely aligned to the government's intent as well. How do you differentiate between what are government responsibilities and what are your responsibilities?
It's a really good question. I think in theory, that's true, but we operate on a 3-year short-term government cycle where things change pretty quick. So we do have a genuine sort of long-term outcome and aspiration that we work with. We work with all governments of all flavours and sizes. It doesn't really bother us. We'll continue to work constructively, but we can really help give some of that long-term perspective and give some of that historical context when you do have a change. That often, as we all know, corporate memory can be quite short. We can help build that longer-term understanding and higher level of purpose. But how do we differentiate? Ultimately, our kind of, our fiduciary obligations of our trustees are to our 84,000 tribal members first, but actually, as I said, we're totally interested in seeing the broader community succeed. So there is a real natural alignment, as you've said, and I think that's something that we continue to, everyone ultimately wants to see, we all want to see our own spaces and places thrive. And I think when we find that common purpose, we're always all better off.
And so are there services or functions where the Crown thinks that you should be providing them, but you think the Crown should be providing them, or vice versa?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Look, there are areas, because we have the Treaty of Waitangi as kind of a framing for the conversation, there are areas that sort of sit within, core treaty settlement kind of elements of what we'd consider to be Article 2 of the Treaty of Waitangi, and then there are areas of Article 3, as we term it, which is where there is often an overlap. And I'll give you an example where we might, we've got some teams that work with us that deliver certain housing programs or things of that kind, that actually we have Crown agencies that do some of that as well. So we actually find areas where we can partner together to sort of maximise impact and investment and outcomes, or where there are areas where we'll deliver them on our own, or where the Crown will be delivering them on our own. So it's just an ongoing conversation that we have, and we have relationships with all of the different Crown agencies that work here, and we hold those relationships at both a local and central level. So it does make us kind of broad, and I always want to get us a bit narrower, so we can do, you can't do everything, and we're really clear on that. We can't do everything. We don't actually want to do everything, and there are certain areas where you're much better to have clarity of what your role is and who's delivering what. So we work really hard on that as well.
And are there inefficiencies or challenges with running services in parallel?
I think there's always a risk of duplication and things like that, and inefficiency. Of course, there's a risk. We work really hard as the Crown does to try to manage some of those risks. We've actually had really good sort of prototype examples where the Crown has kind of enabled us to deliver certain things sort of on their behalf, and borne out real success stories with some of those examples. And there are other examples where, we can absolutely understand that might be better delivered by the Crown. So we're quite, as I said earlier, we're quite open to prototyping or innovating around different approaches that might work best. Education's an area of real interest where we invest alongside the Crown, but we're constantly focusing on actually trying to close those equity gaps between Māori achievement and the broader, because much like I imagine it is in Australia, the key here is that there's a huge equity gap, right, in terms of all different social measures, no matter what you want to talk about it, what frame, where there's such a difference in terms of outcomes and equity and inequity. We've been a really important partner for the Crown as they've sought to close those gaps across the board.
Mm. And are there examples where most of the population where you're providing services is Māori, but not all of them, and that creates weird situations where there's a small proportion of non-Māori people who are not getting the services because they're provided through you, not through government, or is that not really?
Not really an issue that I can sort of think of any specific examples of that. Because we don't, as I said, we don't have, I don't see it in that way. The way we deliver a lot of our things is through our sort of marae-based communities there, but we also deliver sort of services to our broader population, but they live all over. There's actually 8,000 tahus that live in Queensland, for example, so they're spread all around the place. And so the supports and things that we offer aren't constrained to any kind of geographic area. They go right out to wherever the people are. So we don't tend to see that kind of degree of inequity emerging too often.
That's interesting. So they're not entirely place-based.
No. So all Ngāi Tahu whānau, no matter where they live, are part of our tribe, and that we have a really detailed kind of what we call a whakapapa database that kind of is the basis for we've got real clarity on who our tribal members are, and then those are the individuals that we can support no matter where they are. So we had a roadshow, for example, an Aitahu roadshow in Brisbane last year. We had about 1,300 of our tribe turn up to the convention centre there in Brisbane. It was a cool event.
And so what are the mechanisms for sharing value or sharing decision-making powers with that, broad structure across 84,000 members?
Yeah, so we have a tribal register or tribal database, and each one of those tribal members will be registered with their own Papatipu Runaka, which is their kind of traditional village that they're from. And that enables them to have sort of voting rights, enables them to contribute to a democratic kind of election of their own representatives and things of that kind. So they can participate, remotely like we are here. We have sort of Runaka Hui for those marae communities, and they might have 100 people turn up in person and a couple of hundred joining online and things like that. So we provide those opportunities to contribute through virtual means as well.
And what about sharing of value? Are there shareholders or distributions of profits, or is it all not non-profit and reinvested in service provision?
We have a charitable status. We have as an example of a means of a mechanism of ultimately of distribution. We were at the time, I think it was 2005, established Whaidawa, which is like a superannuation scheme, if you like, for our whānau. So we have about 40,000 tribal members that are registered for that scheme, so they can make contributions, and we match their contribution, things like that, and pay distributions. We're slightly different from our KiwiSaver, so it's similar to your Australian superannuation, slightly different to our KiwiSaver here in New Zealand scheme, in that we can make contributions for tertiary education or their first home, and also when they turn 55 rather than 65. So we've got sort of schemes like that serve some of those purposes there. So some of it's delivered through those kind of means, sort of in that financial space, or through, as I said, education or other grants that we administer as well as service delivery itself.
So are those contributions matched based on employment, like a super scheme, or just based on membership of the tribe?
Membership, yeah.
So 50-50. 50-50.
I don't want to give you sort of numbers. I don't have that in front of me in terms of what those actual contributions are, how we match them. I know that we do focus most on, for example, the young ones. So we make a higher level of contributions in terms of match savings to under 18s and things like that, to try to support them through some of those tertiary education elements and things, or buying a first home. But we do have a degree of match savings as well for everybody, but it's not the same standard.
So it's not just incentivizing savings that can be drawn on for significant money. It's also
absolutely.
grants for those phases, like education.
Yeah. Absolutely, I think it's gone really well. I think it's sitting at about 170 million there under management now in that scheme, for looking, for this ongoing kind of ongoing. It was called Whaidawa. So it's there are. I'm not sure there are other iwi that have that scheme or a scheme like that just yet, but I know others are sort of looking at it all the time as a.
And so, is it self-funding, or is there a grant element to it?
Self-funding, it's all funded by us. Yep. So we've got an external fund manager. But we have an in-house team that kind of administer the scheme. Yeah.
But you've put the capital there, and then it's built by people making contributions, like the super scheme. But there is more money that people can access than what they've put in based on these life events. Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. And last question, I'd love to hear more about the capacity building work done over the last 20 years, really.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that, as I said earlier, we haven't. It's never to say that we've got all the answers on that, but we run a series of different sort of capability development programs. So, a couple of examples. One would be Manawa Nui, which is a scheme where we identify through a selection process, application process, talented young tribal members who are sort of up and coming in their careers in whatever space they're in, and we'll bring them into a sort of a development program, sort of governance or governance development or executive management development. We have a cadets program where we'll bring cadets not just into our organisation or our range of commercial businesses, but we place them in other professional service firms or other engineering firms and things like that. So we have relationships with the big engineering firms or the Big Four or things like that, where we sort of develop a program of cultural development, but also of expertise and just deep knowledge development. Sort of build these cohorts of young ones that sort of come in for summer internships, or they're connected to the program for 2 or 3 years at a time. And that's been a great tool for bringing people closer into what we're doing, and then sort of building that connection and knowledge sharing, and also then having that continued relationship with us. And then whatever role they go to outside of the organisation, they're always sort of ambassadors for the organisation as well, and able to connect and things like that. So there's a couple of examples there. We run each of the marae communities as well at the regional level run their own kind of capability development too. So bringing people in, cultural development within their own communities as well. So there's a whole range of things that we do. As I said, definitely haven't got all the answers, and always open to improvement around how we can do some of those things, because it is absolutely critical. Probably our most important thing is our sort of talent pipeline, and having the right people, as the future leaders to take us into that next phase.
Thank you very much. And can I have one more, even though I said the last one was the last one? So you're delivering 149 programs. How sophisticated is your social return on investment, impact measurement, and how do you think that compares to the way government measures impact and adjusts its programs?
Great question. So we've actually we're lucky we've got some great people in-house. So we actually use the Treasury model and Treasury guidelines to develop our own social return on investment measures, which use a similar kind of rubric, which we overlay our own Ngāi Tahu lens over. So we like to say it took Treasury a couple of years to analyse the school lunch program in New Zealand, and we've done better than that in terms of we've put all our programs through a kind of social return on investment lens over the last year or so. So we're able to kind of show what demonstrates value across a range of different social outcomes. The opportunity now is to really continue to deepen that focus, I think, into the future, and work out, where are those real core investments that you can make that have long-term intergenerational things. And this is really, it's live this is a live discussion that we're having in New Zealand generally. We've just established, or the Crown's just established, the Social Return or Social Investment Agency, which is a new government agency sort of leaning into the space. Our Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis, is really big into this sort of stuff. So we're actively engaged in conversations with the Crown all the time around refining best practice. And so we also have some external analysis of our program. So we'll get the likes of Impact Lab. So our former Prime Minister Bill English will come in, his firm, and analyse, the return on investment. So for some of our programs, we've got some incredible numbers of social return on the dollar that's being spent.
And is it then actually a useful decision-making tool? Do you stop doing programs because it's a low return?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of where we, as a whānau organisation, this is where the overlay of us being a family organisation, ultimately an iwi organisation. So we're not just a corporate, even though I might sound all jargonistic and things. It's very much a family organisation. We're all related to each other ultimately. And so, we have to have a degree of a process around what we do and don't do, and what there's much more of a wider engagement that needs to happen for each of those kind of decisions. But yes, it's important to have. That's where that Ngāi Tahu overlay I talked about is really important. So you don't just sound like you're just a corporate jargon. We do have to go through a real process to think about what we're going to do going into the next phase, because we're not getting any smaller. We're growing at probably double the rest of the New Zealand population, and things like that. So that we've got a whole bunch of things that we know, climate change and the impacts of those kind of things are going to push us in different directions as well. So, but there's a big, deep engagement process. We talk about, for iwi, for Māori here in New Zealand, the process of coming to a decision is often more important than the decision that you come to. So you have to take the time to go through that, have a lot of cup of tea all around the place, and come to decisions around where we're going to shift some of our focus into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney. Senator Little's had some texts via teleconference, chorus call. Can you hear us, Senator Little?
I can, and thank you, and apologies for the technical issues, Ben, but we'll be able to make it work. I just my questions are mostly focused on the economic development aspects. I would like to ask you about how you make decisions about who